Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. And as I told you during the week 1 lecture, I'm going to be offering you a recorded lecture really that you can view on YouTube because that's where I post them each week. And the lecture, of course, does not take the place of the reading. That's just a reminder I want to get out there. This lecture does not cover all the material in the reading. It really just covers the highlights. So last week we talked about the importance of strategic planning. This week I want to move into specifics and I want to talk about this idea of mandates. And our reading and this lecture and our discussion will all emphasize mandates. Let me move right into that. Okay, this is what we're doing for week 2. The assigned reading for this week is from the Bryson text, chapter 2, and then I'm having you read pages 117 through 124 of chapter 4. Chapter 2 really is the overview chapter of the entire 10-step process. And I want you to keep that chapter in mind, and you'll be continually going back to that chapter as we move through the semester. I'll say more about that on the next slide. The reading in chapter 4, those pages there cover the issue of mandates. The second thing you're going to be looking at this week is a website for a particular real organization, and that is the organization is called the One World Community Health Center in Omaha, and you see I have their website there, and we're going to be using them as an example of mandates this week. The purpose of this week's activities then, first is to understand the meaning of the term mandates. Second, to understand how this term mandates applies in strategic planning. And third, to understand why it's important for us to know about mandates as we work through improving organizations. Okay, this is the Bryson 10-step strategy change cycle. Again, this isn't a really good picture, but what you should do at this point, if you have your textbook out, turn to page 44 and 45, where the 10-step model is depicted. Again, we're going to be going back to this model throughout the semester. And we're not going to necessarily cover the 10-step strategy change cycle model in perfect sequential order, but we will cover the parts that are very important, and we will end up covering most of the model. This week, you can see what I have circled there is step 2, and it talks about mandates. And you see under the term mandates is typed requirements and expectations, and that is what mandates are. So we're going to describe these more fully in the rest of the lecture. Now this particular depiction of the strategy change cycle comes from another book by Bryson called Creating Your Strategic Plan, and that particular book happens to be a handbook. It's actually a very good handbook to use if you happen to be launching a strategic plan in your organization. It has a lot of worksheets in it, a lot of practical steps you can take. And what I would say about that book is after you complete this semester and at some point in your career, if somebody says, hey, I'd like you to run the strategic planning effort, I would look up that book by Bryson and Alston, the co-author, called Creating Your Strategic Plan, and consider buying that. In this book, they have this simplified version of the strategic planning model, and what they say about this 6-step model here is that you can begin anywhere because you note the arrows that are circular. And so we are going to begin right here where it says mission, mandates, and environmental assessment. This week we're talking about mandates. In future weeks we're going to talk about mission statements, and then we're going to talk about assessing the environment. And these are all very important, but we want to begin with understanding mandates. All right, what is this term mandates? What does it mean? Well, in strategic planning, you're going to see it has a specific definition that we're going to apply, but just in terms of the definition of the word itself, this is a term that gets kicked around a lot, especially in government and nonprofits. This term is used often in describing particular features of policy. So, for example, the Affordable Care Act, which we're all familiar with, also known as Obamacare, has a couple of items in that law as it was written. It has this thing called the individual mandate and something called the employer mandate. What do those things mean? The individual mandate, as you probably know, means that every individual in the United States is supposed to have health care insurance. And if you don't have some kind of health care insurance that you can get from your employer, then you can buy it on a health care exchange. Or you can just go without. But when you go without, according to the law, you will pay a penalty when you file your income tax. And so that's the reason for this form that the IRS has been sending all of us during the last couple of years of income tax filing. So the law says that there's an individual mandate or individual requirement that you have health insurance. And there was this other aspect of the law called the employer mandate. That's changed a little bit over the course of the law, but in essence, what the employer mandate is that employers of a certain size were required to offer their employees the opportunity to purchase healthcare insurance. So in this case, a mandate means a requirement. Again, politicians often talk about a mandate from the voters, and you'll hear this a lot. When someone wins an election, they'll say, well, you know, the majority of people voted for me, whether it's 51% or 71%, and so therefore I have a mandate from the voters, meaning they have tasked me to carry out the program I talked to them about. Mayors and governors often talk about unfunded mandates, and when they use that term, they're talking about requirements typically from the federal government to do something that they don't get funding for. A great example is many cities are engaging in a sewer separation project right now to separate older storm sewers from older sanitation sewers, making them separate sewer lines. That's a costly project, and all cities are required to do it, but it's not funded by the federal government. The United Nations sometimes uses the term mandate to refer to a specific authorization for a member nation to take action over some defined period, some defined geographic location, and that's the term they use, mandate, meaning order, and it's very specific and it outlines what that member state is supposed to do. Well, so here's what it is in our context. Bryson says that mandates are formal and informal, and they are placed on organizations consisting of the various musts that it confronts. So let's just stop right there. What Bryson is saying is a mandate is a must. In other words, your nonprofit organization that you just started, for example, has some things it must do. So how do we derive the things that an organization must do? Let's move on with Bryson's definition a little bit more and expand it. Sorry about that. I will go back now. Second, they may believe that they are more tightly constrained in their actions than they actually are. And third, they may assume that if they are not explicitly told to do something, they're not allowed to do something. So these are three mistakes that result from not understanding mandates. Well, okay, so let's do some word parsing here from Bryson's definition. First of all, he says that mandates are formal and informal, but they both represent musts that an organization confronts. Second, he says that mandates are requirements, restrictions, expectations, pressures, and constraints that an organization faces. And third, he makes this statement that few members of any organizations have ever read the mandates. Let's drill down even further. Okay, requirements. requirements kind of sounds formal, right? So this could refer to a law or a regulation, perhaps assigning some tasks to the organizations. Restrictions. What are restrictions? Restrictions are probably a formal imposition on an organization. That might be, for example, a law or ordinance telling an organization that it cannot do something. Third, expectations. Well, if someone expects that an organization is going to do something, whose expectations are we talking about? And then again, are expectations formal or informal? So let's think about if you and I stood up a nonprofit, let's say it was a food bank. What are we expected to do? Well, broadly, I guess we're expected to feed people who need food. But then whose expectations rule how much food, how often we provide food, how much we're going to spend on food? Who has those expectations? Well, it might be people who donate to our organization. It might be people we serve. There may be some set of formal expectations. There may be informal expectations. And then pressures. So think about this. Who puts pressure on an organization? Insiders or outsiders or both? Does the staff and the volunteers in a nonprofit, do they put pressures on an organization? Probably. How about outsiders? Again, donors, clients, both. And then constraints. How are constraints a mandate? Well, think about this. If you desire to do something as an organization, but you don't have enough resources to do it, you don't have enough capacity to do it, you don't have enough personnel to do it, does a constraint then become a mandate? And does that constraint shape what you must do? So mandates can be formal or informal, but they shape what an organization is supposed to do, even if, again, the members of the organization don't often think about the mandates as they should. And why is it then that organization members don't know about these mandates? So let's drill down a little further. And the way we're going to do that then has to do with this week's discussion and activities. So I could go on and on about mandates, but I want you to do a little discovery, and here's how we're going to do it. First of all, make sure you read the text, chapter 2, and those portions of chapter 4, which I assigned. Second, I'd like you to go to the One World website and explore that website in detail. Don't just glance at it. You're going to explore that website in detail and see what this organization is really all about in Omaha. Understand what they're providing to the community. And so I want you to spend some time navigating their website. And then I'm going to have you go to this website called HRSA, which is a government organization that actually sets up mandates for organizations, clinics like One World. And so I want you to understand that. And then, as part of our learning, we're going to have a discussion on mandates. And to have this discussion on mandates, we're going to use One World as our example. So you're going to want to go to the discussion this week and answer the questions. And then, of course, I want you to respond to your classmates. So let me reiterate, because it's early in the course, how the discussion board should be working. First of all, I pose questions, and then your job is to answer questions in a very complete manner. Then I ask you to respond to classmates, and when I ask you to do that, a response shouldn't be, hey, you did a really good job, and then end it there. To tell someone they did a really good job is actually a pretty good start, but then I'd like you to explore what they wrote and think about what they wrote, and I'd like you to critique or answer or ask questions for clarification. And this provides us with a fuller understanding from each other of what the discussion is about. That's the way we need to keep the discussion flowing, to be able to go back and forth with each other on the things we've said. Let me just switch gears for just 1 second, and I want to talk about the upcoming term project proposal. Already coming up on September 10th, which is not the end of this week, but is Saturday, the end of week 3. At this point, you should already be thinking seriously about an organization you're interested in and starting to reach out to them to figure out the person that you want to interview. So remember, from reading the syllabus, you know this, your term project consists of you conducting an interview with a person from a nonprofit or government organization, and you conducting a strategic analysis of that organization. And again, in the syllabus, I give you options for the kind of strategic analysis that it should be. Something that will help you is if you go to the assignments tab on Blackboard, you will see that the two short analysis assignments that I give you are both strategic analyses of organizations, but they're very abbreviated ones. They're not to the level of the term project. However, those are the kinds of activities that are examples of what I'm asking you to do in the syllabus for the term project. So take a look ahead at those assignments. They're already posted, and that gives you a good idea of what I'm talking about with the term project. And so finally, if you're just at this point completely confused by this term project, what I'd like you to do is email me, and I will gladly individually go through it with any or all of you, because this project really is designed to give you a fuller understanding of the strategic planning and strategic thinking process. And so I want it to be a success for everyone. And that is why I build the term project in 4 parts. You know, the proposal, the interview plan, the outline, and then the final paper. I want to build it in those 4 parts so that you can build it incrementally and have a lot more confidence in the research and the interview that you're doing. So that's it for this week. I look forward to reading the discussions that everyone has. And there's my blank screen, so we are done with the lecture for this week. Thanks very much.